Good afternoon, everyone. As it was mentioned, I'm Kathleen Navarro. I head up talent management, and I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at New York Life, and very excited to be here with you this afternoon. We have an exciting panel. We're going to be talking about how ERGs can collaborate, right? When we think about our ERGs, the employee resource groups, and the impact that they have, right? We think about the impact of the business and meeting business goals, or helping to promote an inclusive environment, or how our members are ambassadors for our companies. And that's just at an individual ERG level. And what's the power if our ERGs start to collaborate more and work together? Work with each other, work with the business, work with external partners. So that's our discussion this afternoon. We're going to be hearing from our four panelists and the experiences they've had at their respective companies. We'll also talk about some of the challenges. There are challenges and things that we should be thoughtful about as we embark on collaboration. And we'd love to make this interactive. So I'll tee it up with a couple of questions, but I'll shoot it off to you all to see if you have any questions. And at any point during the conversation, if you have any questions, want more information, just raise your hand. It would be really cool, I think, and much more interesting if this is more of a dialogue than a presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and we'll start with Sheetal with introductions.
Can everyone, okay, yeah, everyone can hear me. Okay, so my name is Sheetal Bhatt. I work at Goldman Sachs. I currently head up globally the execution and prime services operations team for the firm within our securities division. And I've been with the firm for, this year will be 16 years, started as an analyst and progressed through my entire career at the firm, made managing director, not this past cycle, the cycle before, and am extremely involved in a number of the networks at the firm, originally starting with the Women's Network and then having moved to Hong Kong for 6 years of my career, spent a lot of time on a variety of different networks out in Asia, and then was the sponsor for the Operations Asian Professional Network at Goldman Sachs. So very, very passionate about the cause and very active in the community within Goldman and then outside of Goldman Sachs as well.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. I'm Priya Rajani. I work with Citi within the global markets business. I lead North America client strategy for our non-financial institutions, focusing on FX rates and commodities. I've been with Citi for just over a decade. Seems too long, but not long enough. And I'm currently also the co-chair for the Asian Affinity Network at Citi for the New York chapter, which actually is our largest chapter in the United States. I've spent a lot of time in Citi, within different businesses. I started in global wealth management when Sally Krawcheck used to lead the business, moved to the private bank, and most recently in global markets. And throughout, I think I've been an ambassador of diversity in many different ways. Initially just individually and personally, and then later on, as I moved up, to be a senior vice president, I've been involved with the Women's Network as well as with the Asian Heritage Network. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today. Please feel free to ask a lot of questions. All of us are here to answer any questions you have, and I'm excited.
Great. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everyone isn't too tired from lunch. It was delicious, so thank you again to John for all of that and the team. My name is Jean Lau. I am an executive director at JP Morgan. I work in the private bank, and so we help our high net worth, as well as the broad majority of our retail clients, achieve their goals by creating and developing solutions for them. And I have been with JP Morgan for about 15 years now, in various roles, first in the investment bank, in interest rate derivatives, sales and trading, and then moved over to the private bank, where I first worked in alternatives, so helping to structure and market so hedge funds, private equity, and real estate, and now covering managed solutions from an investor relations perspective. I have been involved in a number of different employee resource groups, from our Asian Leadership Forum, as well as our gender-oriented or maternity buddy program. So that would be for women or parents who might be coming back from leave and or might need a little bit of help and guidance as they look to kind of assimilate back into the workforce after having gone away for a little while.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hernan Celis, and thank you very much for staying with us during this session. I work with JP Morgan Chase, and I am a commercial banker where my team and I get to work with some of the most amazing entrepreneurs in New York City, and we're very fortunate to strategically advise them on credit and lending and many other aspects of what's necessary for them to grow their business. Aside from being a commercial banker, I've also been extremely involved with the business resource groups within JP Morgan Chase. Since I joined the firm in 2010, I've held a number of different roles as co-lead, co-chair of Adelante, which is our Latino business resource group at the local, national, and global level. Recently, I'm now sitting as a chair emeritus, where I work very closely with the current leadership, providing strategic guidance, and I also work very closely with our senior managers to continue to seek support for the benefit of the BRG. Adelante has grown now to with a membership base of close to 17,000, and most recently it was recognized among the top 5 Latino BRGs in the country.
That's great. So as you can see, we have a really great group of experts here who have been working in the diversity field and with their employee resource groups at their companies, and excited to get started here. So when we think about the benefits of cross-collaboration across the ERGs, there's a lot to it, right? We can expand the reach of the individual employee resource group. We can certainly save some budget dollars. It helps with intersectionality and the multi-dimensions of the workforce. And that's just a few of the examples. So I thought we'd start with seeing collaboration in action. And Chantal, if you could describe how the ERGs work together at Goldman Sachs and some of the experiences that you've had at your firm as a starting point.
Yes. So to the point that you made, I think it's important to, even from just a budget perspective, to participate across the ERG so that you can get the most for your buck, right? Trying to be more efficient in how we kind of host our events, et cetera. But one of the examples that I like to share is, as part of the Asian Professional Network within operations, there is something that we coined as an event, which was really popular with our population called, we called it Chai Time, and networking with chai. And the reason for this is, what we noticed is a lot of the networking sessions, either they were after hours, which might have not been super convenient for different populations, and then secondly, drinks and wine and cheese, etc., is maybe not always a top priority or appetite for the community. So instead, we started to have these networking sessions in the middle of the day or around 3 p.m. for about an hour, and the purpose of it was to bring the Asian community together. That was the main purpose. But what we found is, like, networking for the Asian community doesn't come natural. Usually we need, and I will speak for myself, from my own experience, it's easier to speak to someone when there is substance, or there is a topic that you need to talk to, or there's something in common, as opposed to just randomly going up to someone and introducing yourself. So what we did was we took the theme of chai, and we featured chais from around the world, and we hosted a session to educate people on the different uses of chai and how it's a very central, culturally very applicable to many different regions across Asia. And through that, we paired up groups or individuals to have a conversation around chai, but then which also naturally created a dialogue. And it allowed the individuals to take the dialogue however they wanted to, whether it was through business lines to talk about the chai, or even to ask what floor they sat on in the building, or could they follow up with a coffee with that individual later on. And we found that this event was very popular, and it actually was so popular that it ended up going to the firm-wide level as well. And through this, we spoke to our partners in the Hispanic and Latino network in operations, and it was a very similar concept. So we kind of branded the two together, and it was, café con leche on the OHLN side, and then, chai time with the Asian population. And bringing the communities together, we were really trying to solve the same problem. We're trying to expose our community to access to different individuals across different networks through something that was very familiar to the culture and that they could also learn from one another. So that was something that worked really well for our organization, and it's something that the Chai Time still kicks off formally and informally.
Great, that's a great example. And I think it's important to note that there are a lot of common interests across the different communities. And so finding that thread of what each of the respective ERGs are interested in and working around that is one tip when you're facing this. Jean, I'm interested though, have you experienced any sort of hesitation or concern from ERG members around collaboration? You know, when we think about collaboration and when you think about the idea, the concept of an employee resource group and the idea of bringing people in a similar community together, and now we're saying, and the benefit of that, and now we're saying, okay, well, we want you to do that, but now we also want you to reach out to other communities. There may be some hesitation and concern about sort of losing the mission of your particular group, or like what's the benefit of having this reach out. So can you describe with your experience if you've come up against any of that?
I'll start with the answer, which is yes. But I'll get to the longer part of the story because that's where things get interesting. And so I think that we all have to acknowledge that resources are not infinite and they're not unlimited. However, I do think that something we also have to acknowledge is that the pie doesn't always have to be viewed as a fixed size. So as we collect and collaborate amongst each other, we could actually grow the size of that pie and actually create or expand those resources and opportunities for either within our corporation or even more broadly across our community. And so I think that I'll give you a little bit of background on my organization. So JP Morgan's a massive organization. We have a number of different ERGs. We also have multiple lines of businesses. So we have ERGs that span all lines of businesses that are firm-wide. For example, Anjali Pranjpe here in the audience is a partner of mine. She is co-head for Tri-State for one of those multi-line of business organizations, but we also have individual line of business organizations like the Asset and Wealth Management LOB, which is what I'm a part of. And we just started last year. So we initiated our ERG last year because we thought that there was demand and that there would be an opportunity for employees within this particular line of business to be able to focus on some of the issues and some of the areas of opportunity for them. And so when we've initiated our journey, we knew that we needed to collaborate with others and that we would need allies and we would need to benefit from the learning and the success of other ERGs. Now, that's not to say that we also, as we were creating our programming and as we were creating our own mission statement, didn't fully believe that we knew all the issues, that we were sort of the experts in the subject matter. And so there was a little bit of this push-pull to determine how much of this is going to be a development from an internal perspective, that we as a leadership team for our particular ERG are identifying what the problems are and then coming up with solutions, and then trying to marry that with what we know to be a whole universe of expertise and experience that exists across the ERGs within JP Morgan. And so when I say that yes, there was certainly consideration and there was some concern about how widely we wanted to collaborate with other ERGs, because again, I think there's this constant concept that there is limited resources, but we overcame that simply because we knew what our mission was, and that in order to achieve that mission, which was to help retain and develop our Asian population within asset wealth management, we would need to leverage all the resources at our fingertips, and that means extending that olive branch, to other ERGs and trying to collaborate with them and then benefit from their mind share.
That's great. I love that concept of grow the pie. I think that's really an important perspective to have. I know I co-led our women's initiative for a few years back, I think it was 2012 or so, around then. And one of the things when I became co-chair, my co-chair and I had decided that we really wanted to do a strong outreach to men, right? And to grow, start to have a broader perspective. And at first, at first we reached out to the men, and the interesting thing is that the men all were interested in participating, but because of the name of the employee resource group, the Women's Initiative, they didn't think that they belonged, that they were welcome. So we got past that, but then the women at some of the events would turn to the men and say, you know, this is the Women's Initiative, it's for women, right? And so we had to educate our women as well to the importance of having men in the room. You know, I would say if it was a room full of women talking to women, we weren't going to really be making progress, right? We needed the men to come along with us as well. And it's grown tremendously over the past, 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been. And I think the concept, allyship is very, very important. And this concept of, doing this cross ERG collaboration, I think sometimes people don't recognize that it is important that we learn from each other and that we help each other grow. So grow the pie. That's really good. So when we're thinking about this, we've focused a little bit so far on the internal aspect. The ERGs can really be a great resource as we look to the external environment and supporting our external partnerships. But again, I think you could have some hesitation, right, when we think about employee resource groups and the members and people thinking that, oh, the employee resource groups are here to help our individuals with their professional development or with their networking, like we saw here, and how we, maybe help with internal mobility. Like, why should we be helping with external engagement and our external partnerships? And Hernan, I know that your group has done a lot around this, and could you describe, from your experience, what it's been like, what the benefits are, and some of the things you've done supporting your external partnerships?
Yeah, of course, and of course I don't want to discount all the great benefits that come with the internal involvement, of course, right? Because internally you truly get to develop great skills. You truly get to expand your professional network, which helps tremendously. But focusing on the external aspect, many times through your involvement in the BRGs, you get invited to have a seat at the table at discussions that are happening externally. One organization that to me comes to mind is Alpha, which is the largest Latino professional organization in the country. JP Morgan has had a great relationship with Alpha for quite some time, and what we realized is that by having that external partnership, you become a stronger team player within JP Morgan. Why? Because you help to advance the dialogue. Adelante has been a very key player in creating awareness about the impact of Alpha, so that more senior managers within JP Morgan can be more active, as well as focus on the pipeline of future talent that we would love to continue to develop, and Alpha has been a great partner. So that's one of the many ways. One in particular that is also very impactful is that many times through our external partnerships, we create awareness about organizations that are making a stronger impact in the community, not only in terms of professional development, and one in particular is Hispanic Federation as well. It's one of the largest advocates for Latinos in the US, and through our involvement and advocacy, JP Morgan has been able to, in prior situations, has been able to increase the financial commitment to this organization thanks to our advocacy. So it's just many different benefits that are adding value to the community and to the firms that we represent.
Have you seen employees sort of an increase in engagement when they have the opportunity to participate with external organizations, either being a member of Alpha, for example, or going to a conference? Like, what kind of benefits do you see with that?
I'll tell you one quick example, and one of our Adelante members, I met her name is Stephanie Rodriguez. She's currently the chief of staff for the head of human resources for JP Morgan Chase. When I first met Stephanie, incredibly shy individual. We all knew that she was incredibly smart and just needed to get out of her comfort zone. And through our involvement with certain organizations in the community, she was able to speak in public in front of students, serve as a mentor. And we saw very quickly how she just came out of her shell. And when she was hosting events at JP Morgan through her Adelante leadership, speaking in front of 300 individuals, these are just some of the benefits that we've seen for our members. Another organization that comes to mind is called HISPA. And what HISPA does is that they make it easy for executives to come and speak to students, specifically students at the elementary school level. And what many organizations do is that they come and they teach students about the ABCs of savings, etc. What HISPA does, which is quite interesting, which makes it even easier for you to participate, is just for you to share your story. And what they do is that they also provide with training so that if you're speaking in public for the first time, they're going to coach you, and now your audience are a bunch of elementary school students, so you're not going to be feeling as scared, right?
Right, it's a safe space.
Yeah, it's a safe space. You work on your public speaking, and you're making a big impact. And they keep data, because the founder of HISPA is a PhD in mathematics, and the data has shown that those young children who've heard great executives share their story are more likely now that they want to go to college. They see themselves as a banker or any other role. So there's some of the ways that we are adding benefit to our members.
Yeah, that's really incredible. There's so much power in the employee resource groups, and you see it both internally and the development of the membership and the exposure and the experiences that your individual members get. But then when you look at what you can do for the broader community and the impact that you can have on, you know, younger people's lives and them having role models, it's really fantastic. And I think something that you said earlier when we first kicked off this question was, you alluded to, is, you know, internal and external are not mutually exclusive, right? ERGs can cover a lot of ground. It doesn't just have to be focused on one particular area. So thank you for that. So there was a Forbes study. It was called Fostering Innovation Through a Diverse Workforce. And it talks about how the formula for diversity is rapidly changing. It's no longer only about increasing representation and having a heterogeneous workforce. It's what you actually do with that workforce, right? How you can use that to create innovative products or come to better solutions. It helps set companies apart if companies really know, you know, how to go about this the right way. And the ERGs can really help with this. And so Priya, I'm interested in how, what your advice or experience is in how the employee resource groups can better connect with the strategy of the business. And a lot of I've been using the term employee resource groups. A lot of companies, it's actually business resource groups, right? We've really seen an evolution on the whole experience. It started out as employee network groups. Then the groups evolved to employee resource groups, and now there's another evolution in becoming business resource groups. So if you could just speak to what you see as sort of some ways that these groups can really evolve to business resource groups and really helping the business.
Sure, thank you. Just anecdotally, I was talking to, BG on the table, the woman here in the red jacket. She used to be at Citi with Private Bank, and she actually is one of the co-founders of the Asian Affinity Group at Citi. And it's just funny, while she had great things to say, I've also met some other folks at different events who used to be at Citi, founding members of Asian Affinity Groups. And the only memory they all have is how it used to be a party town. And my first reaction was like, no, it's not a party town. Second reaction is like, why am I not invited to these parties? And I think the biggest shift has been that all these ERGs have now started to, kind of convert into BRGs, like business resource groups. There's many different ways of doing this, and my colleagues here have shared different ways that they've been doing this, but I would like to highlight a few things that Citi has been focused on, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. The very first thing we did is we redefined our engagement model, to recruit and retain participation for longer term. And how we did that is, Mike Corbat made some very bold statements about diversity, and I don't need to quote them, but you can just Google it and you'll read it. And what he made sure that every single person who reported to him is responsible for some ERG. Now that could be ethnicity, that could be gender, sexual orientation, parents, veterans. And he not just assigned them an ERG and said, here's X amount of dollars and go have fun. He said, no, I need you to come back to me and tell me, what are some of the problems that you've identified? How are we going to solve them? And how are we going to make sure that every business, whether it's in United States, it's in Asia, each region, each country has their own, problems or challenges to deal with the minorities or with the ERGs locally. The second thing we did is we created some targeted metrics, not just representation metrics to say, we're gonna have 50% women, but we actually understood where is our current metric, how do we get there, and why is it important to do that? I mean, every research paper you pick up is going to tell you that increasing diversity, having more minorities, having more women in board positions is going to make your business grow bigger, better, in X number of years. So that's what we did. We actually defined, our engagement model. We created some targeted metrics. Two important metrics where we went public about it is one, increasing our African American representation from 6% to 8%. Seems like a very small number, but trust me, it requires a lot of work. And the second thing we did is that we want to increase our women representation from AVP levels to managing directors to 40%. It was about 35% a few years ago, and the 5% increase has involved tremendous amount of work. And the last thing that we did is we understood that it's important to create the pipeline at the entry level. So right from our summer interns and even at our entry-level analysts, we made sure that we increased, our minority representation as well as women representation. It's not a quota. We're not saying that if there's 100 analysts coming in, 30 have to be minorities or 50 have to be women. But it was a very targeted approach to say, we started targeting schools that were primarily African American, and we said, we will get a larger population in the pool, and only then we can hit our targets. So some very pointed things that were done in different countries and different businesses. And the last thing that we did is, while everyone sitting at the top, can have all these different agendas and targets and, goals, it was important to actually disseminate these goals to individual businesses. So each business head is responsible to our diversity officer, to our head of our HR, to answer questions to say, you didn't meet your target. Why? And what are you doing about this? Accountability. I think it was very important to have accountability at every level of the business. So yes, it's a party town. We all get budgets and we all do different things with the money that we get. But it was very important to understand that the businesses are now held responsible and accountable to come back to employees and to their seniors to say, what are we doing about, the problems that we identified and the fact that we said that we are a big ambassador and proponent of diversity and inclusion. Just saying it is not enough. We actually have to do certain things.
Can I chime in
Sure.
to that as well? So within JP Morgan, all of our BRGs are also aligned to operating committee members who are direct reports to Jamie Dimon, our CEO. And one thing that we do within Adelante, we truly treat it as a business. And what I mean, we treat it as a business in terms of our leadership. One of the first things that I tell anyone who wants to pursue a leadership role within Adelante is that starting day one, you need to start seeking who's going to be your successor 2 years from now. You need to make time to truly connect with those members of your team who you're working with. They need to know that you have their back. They need to be able to trust you because in BRG, everyone is a volunteer. So you're leading without paying individuals, right? So it comes with another level of, it's a larger challenge. And we're so strategic with how we market ourselves, with the kind of events that we want to have, and a very strong focus on the professional development of our members. Similar to engagement with senior management, we have very active dialogue with our OC members, and we prepare so much for these kind of meetings because it's actually very interesting to see that some of our OC members are running multi-billion-dollar business, and when they sit with us, they really want to know what was the last thing that we promised them? Did we deliver on that? Was there any gaps that we were able to identify? If we cannot continue to move the ball forward, what can they do to help? So the engagement is incredible, and historically we kind of have focused on 3 C's, which have been career development, community, and culture. And since Adelante has a very large network and we work for a bank, we want to focus on a 4th C, which is commerce. And what have we done? So given that we cater to the Latino community and we work for a bank, Adelante started doing a lot of research and learning studies from other organizations about the impact of the Latino business owner, the impact of the Latino consumer, and we've shared that information internally, and it's another way of just creating awareness about the opportunity. Hopefully it can add increased business somehow, but we're very focused on that.
We also used ERGs to identify business problems and come up with a solution. Retention is a big issue, I guess, for every financial services or any other organization. And what we did is, across ERGs, Latino, parents, Asian affinity, African American, one of the common issues was that we were losing a lot of employees for childcare and family care. And we identified that, it's been a lingering issue for many, many years. And while there have been, many programs that have come in that have helped organizations, expand their benefits, Citi actually, made quite a significant change in expanding those benefits, consistently. So, for example, if you're a primary care provider for, your child, whether you're a male or a female, your benefits were pretty standard. And I can't share more because it's all internal to Citi. But I think that's just one example of where we went to many different businesses, and when HR reached out to them to say, what is one of your biggest challenge when it comes to retention? They said, of course, losing people to taking care of families or children. And I think that went across ERGs and, down to each vertical business. And the benefits were expanded, and now, of course, we've seen some improvement, but a long way to go. So I think that's also one way you could do. You could use your ERGs to identify problems within business and then come up with like a common solution or a solution that fits, some businesses.
Add one comment onto what Priya mentioned earlier in terms of accountability data. So at Goldman, we're obsessed with data, and especially data around diversity. And what we've benefited from, to the point made earlier, is bringing the different individuals together who are responsible for whether it's the different ERG groups and talking about the data and the metrics. It also allows the group to see that not every strategy fits every population, and that you need to be mindful of what is the need of that population and adjust your goals accordingly. So whether it is a onboarding of a new talent in the Black and Hispanic space, that might be, in terms of recruiting, we may have a challenge there. But if I think about from an Asian perspective, that's not a challenge that we have. We get a large number of inbound Asian students, but and they do well in their career, but at a certain point, there is a huge drop-off in terms of how many of those individuals progress to the more senior levels. And that's the program, and that's where we talk about advocating for the population, as opposed to thinking about recruiting, retention, et cetera. It's really about how do you create sponsorship, how do you advocate for those individuals to make sure that they can progress or have the opportunity to progress. So I think the data really helps to solve for different problems in different communities. And to the point around like maternity, paternity, et cetera, Goldman made a pretty big statement this year where regardless, it's 5 months across the board for everyone in every jurisdiction in the United States. And of course, in EMEA, there's different rules and regulations, but 5 months across the board. And the amount of excitement and like the stress that came off of people's shoulders has been incredible. And now I see many people in my team where the primary caregiver maybe only had 4 months, so that person took the first 4 months, and then the secondary caregiver came in and took the next 5 months. So having 9 months with your child is, is important. And I think those individuals recognize that after 5 months, I come back and I have a seat at the table and I have my job, and Goldman supported me through this major transition in my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I applaud all the companies that are transparent with the numbers. The numbers are really important. I think it does, to Chatel's point, when you can dig in and you can understand what the different needs are and the different opportunities are and cut the data, that really, you can come up with some impactful solutions. I think there were a couple of other really good tips there, and it's interesting because you all sort of answered my follow-up question. One thing, Priya, when you were talking about all of the great, really sort of the strategy and the approach you have, and that's coming from the top, right? And that's really, I think, imperative and critical. But then I was also thinking, okay, well, if you're in an organization where you don't have that commitment, then what do the ERGs do? And Hernan and Priya, you each gave some really good examples of the ERGs showing where the opportunities are, right? And actually coming up with some thoughtful approaches and ideas that you can present to the business. And I think that that's key too there. So even if you're in an environment where you may not have the same, you may be at a different place on the maturity curve with all of this, and it is a journey, you still have an opportunity to really think about, well, find that little niche and really focus in, as opposed to really trying to like boil the ocean. If you narrow it down and you can find an area where you can provide either some research or poll some of the business areas, or really kind of come up with some ideas that you can present, you'd be amazed at how receptive people will be. Yeah. So I'd like to throw it out to the audience. Do any of you have any questions here? Oh, look at this. It's great. I don't know. Do we have mics to go around? Or, okay, we've got somebody coming with a mic.
My name is Nancy Joyce. I'm with PDT Global. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the Deloitte approach of building inclusion councils instead of having, ethnic-specific or category-specific BRGs, benefits and risks there.
Any thoughts on that?
I guess I could chime in there. I don't necessarily think that I've been exposed too much to how that's developing yet at JP Morgan, but I do think that there is definitely a benefit in cross-collaboration across different ERGs and BRGs, and creating this and nurturing the concept of allyship even more so than within existing BRGs or ERGs. And part of that is because if we stay within our silos, again, I don't think we'll be able to benefit from the experiences as well as the perspectives from other organizations, because we are so kind of internally minded and focused. And so I do think, and having engaged with Hernan as well, that having some sort of kind of multicultural council or a much more diverse, high-level approach to the types of missions that we're all focused on within our ERG is something that we're going to look to explore going forward.
I want to add something to that. So yes, I think I kind of answered that question in a bit of, when I answered the question, how do you change ERGs into BRGs? So, if you talk about like a women's network, a pride network, families, veterans, they're all cross ethnicities, cross gender. But then you also have to cater to, certain ethnicity groups because we have common problems. What I face as an Asian or what I face as a woman could be very different what I could face as a parent. And I may not be comfortable bringing up, something that's very unique to an Asian upbringing. I may not be comfortable talking about that in a parents' network. Or, if I'm an ally of a pride network, they have very different challenges, and I may not be very comfortable talking about that. So I think it's important to have inclusion at the very top, and maybe just cut across business lines, cut across ERGs. But I think we should continue to have the focus on certain types of ERGs, because you'll always have an influx of people at the entry level who will come with those challenges. And if you don't have them to go somewhere, you will lose those people, and they may not want to join any ERG because they'll be like, well, they don't really talk about issues that I face, so why would I want to join that? So yes, inclusion at all levels, at all ethnicities is very important, but somewhere you have to keep that focus as well.
One thing that we say within Adelante, right, is that our events are in English. So everyone can attend. And one thing that we've been focusing on as well is that how can the event add value to someone who's entry level at JP Morgan or someone who is a CEO at JP Morgan? What kind of content can we have? So we focus very strongly on the planning. If the event is going to provide you with an opportunity to learn about a specific business, a specific group, a potential career opportunity, an opportunity to expand your professional network, regardless of what ethnic group you come from, it's going to be a win-win. So we tend to focus strongly on that.
I just say I think organizations are different and there's different needs, and I think each organization needs to sort of figure out what their needs are, and there's no one solution that fits all. And I do think personally a balance of what Priya was talking about. You have your ERGs, and then you have either a multicultural council or a D&I advisory committee, or you do cross collaboration. Kind of gives you sort of the benefit of both. But I think at the end of the day, each company has to figure out what works best for them. Other questions? I think I saw, was there another hand that went up?
So have you thought about or even executed ERGs within your major organizations, maybe in the same city, working across companies? And what do you see potentially benefits of doing that?
I can. So your question is what working with other BRGs across other companies? There is an organization where Adelante was one of the founding members. It's called the Latino Networks Coalition, and it basically brings together all of the Latino BRGs and some of the top firms. Citi is part of it, Goldman as well, and Bank of America, and many other companies, including New York Times. And the leadership, the co-chairs of those organizations, they tend to have a relationship for quite some time. They're open about sharing challenges, sharing best practices, and more importantly, coming together to work on events that have a benefit on the community. One anecdote that I can recall, and this was more from friends that got together, it was to raise funds to help Puerto Rico a couple of years ago during the storm. And among friends, we raised about $50,000. The best part is that many of these friends, they all work for great companies that were able to match, so the impact was even greater. So that's one of the benefits that I can think of. Another one, I think that when I first joined JP Morgan back in 2010, was thanks to an introduction through one of those individuals in that network. So it's just many ways to benefit.
I think that in regards to the Asian ERGs, we also can benefit from cross-corporation, cross-company collaboration. And there are organizations like Ascend. I think that they have connections with many different either public and private companies and their Asian network, where we collaborate, where we can leverage and share resources so that we can all benefit either from a keynote speaker or from a conference or from some sort of educational opportunity that can be more widely spread and shared. So to your point, that we can have that cross-collaboration and then continue to share that more broadly.
Time in Hong Kong for about 6 years, and there a lot of the banks collaborated together to the point made around if there was a key individual traveling into the region from one of the banks and giving women at the aspiring to be senior executives at the firm across Goldman, Bank of America, et cetera, creating a roundtable opportunity to have access to the individual who is in the region. So there was definitely, that's where, because it's a lot smaller, the banks, everyone pretty much knows each other when you're in similar business lines, and it was more informally created, but the group kept in touch, and we made it top priority that anytime an individual from one of our organizations who was a key senior leader that maybe looked or spoke like the individuals in Hong Kong, we would make sure to connect that small group with this individual. So that was a way that we collaborated informally across Hong Kong.
It's interesting. I moved into D&I 5 years ago. I've been at New York Life 25 years. I was on the business side, and 5 years ago I became Chief Diversity Officer and then moved into the Head of Talent Management earlier this year. And I've never in my 25-year career hadn't seen any collaboration like I have in the D&I space. It's an area where it's everyone is very willing to share what they're doing, what the best practices are. People really want each other to succeed because when we individually succeed, we're just helping the ball move forward across the society. And so it's a place where I think that people are very open-minded to it. And I've seen our ERGs do some collaboration across other companies. There was, whether it's they're starting to just start a new group, and we've helped them with, here's how we have it set up, and here's some best practices and ways that you can go about it, to other programs that we've had that have been successful that we've shared, and which I think is really just unique and special. And I think it's important for us to have the dialogue and to share our best practices. There's the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. I don't know if people are familiar with that. It's a group of CEOs have gotten together. It's, I think, celebrating 2 years come this summer. And each of the CEOs at these companies has committed to promoting diversity and inclusion at their individual organizations. And there's 4 things that the commitment requires, and one of them is sharing best practices. So if you go onto the website, whether your company is part of it or not, the best practices are open to everyone. And you share best practices, and you share some things that don't work as well. And so it's a really great resource, I think, particularly if you're running an ERG, to even go and see what ideas other companies have on different areas around diversity and inclusion. So thanks for that.
Challenges, when we kind of cross-pollinate ideas. I think one of the challenges I see is just sometimes non-financial institutions, the flexibility and I guess the options that they have to choose from when it comes to diversity and inclusion, while financial institutions, and I'll speak for Citi, the guidelines and not necessarily the restrictions, but it's just like the do's and the don'ts of how you could use your resources to kind of, widen your agenda. So I think that is a very big challenge. And I'm sure, the non-financial institutions, when they hear our stories, they feel like we have more money, we have more resources, we have more people. So we all have our own challenges, and I don't know if there will ever be an ideal state or a state where all of us can adopt ideas from each other and just, have similar best practices. And also, like, where we are right now, it's also a way of, collaborating and sharing best practices. But what we are saying today, you may want to go back to your organizations and talk about it and implement, but your organization, may have restrictions around, or may not have the resources to implement that. So I think that is a very big challenge.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think particularly when you look at financial services, when you're in a highly regulated industry, some of that conservatism tends to spill over to other areas. But to my point earlier, it's not a shift and lift by any means. I mean, certainly it's important to hear what other companies are doing and hear some best practices. But then at the end of the day, you have to make it fit your organization and what your organization needs and your culture is, and because you're not going to be successful otherwise. Other questions? Oh, we have one in the back.
Hello, hi. My name is Luna. I'm from Metropolis House Plan. Thank you very much for your discussion. I learned a lot about the ERG and the BRG. Our company is a city-owned company. It's also belong to the highly regulated industry because it's health insurance. But we don't have a BRG or ERG particular division. We do have a EEO officer, diversity officer. However, I don't think they can do as much as what you have been described. So as an outsider of the ERG or BRG, I want to ask from the perspective of employees, how do we present ourselves or make ourselves outstanding to the potential ERG or BRG officer to let them know what talents or skill sets we have can make benefit the company from another perspective outside of our regular daily work. Because I can give you an example. Our company is not very big, and I do the Asian market promotion. So, but we don't have a particular like leadership in charge of the Asian employee to help them grow. So sometimes I help the company to organize an Asian American Heritage Month celebration or organize a marching team to join the Asian parades in Chinatown or Flushing. But sometimes we do hear different voices from employees, why we need to participate in this, what's the benefit we can get from joining such a cultural or ethnical activities outside our daily job. So can you please answer this question to help the employee grow, to broaden their perspectives outside of their daily work? Thank you.
Hi, I'm happy to take a stab at that. I think that, and I've heard this mentioned also earlier during the day, is that sometimes senior management doesn't know what they don't know what they don't know, or they may not know that there's a gap in their organization or that there's an opportunity. And so the ERG that I belong to, we actually were created last year. And so it was very much a grassroots effort to identify an opportunity and to pull together a plan, a business plan essentially. So treating this almost like a line of business or a business, and being able to show what the benefits could be or could look like if we were to be able to execute on that plan, and also having an ask. And so part of it is here's the gap that I've identified, whether or not there is an opportunity with clients, or there is an opportunity to increase employee retention, or an opportunity to help continue to develop employees of either of Asian or other ethnic backgrounds by doing X, whether or not it's engaging them a little bit more by developing programming, and we might need a little bit of budget. And so I think, to your point, taking a little bit of that initiative to identify the opportunity and to show what the impact, the positive impact could be, because again, I think that, especially for many of us up here on the panel, commerce is going to be very important. So what are the benefits to the firm? What's the benefits to your organization? And trying to articulate that to them could be very helpful in trying to kind of create the momentum that you need in order to get that visibility. And it really kind of just is that first step to say, like, I've done a little bit of work, and here's some information that I want to share with you, and teach them.
Add to that to say that it starts with the personal initiative. If you have the data to back up what you think the impact could be, and then tell the story. Because I think that bringing all of that together and being able to articulate how you can bring, let's say attrition numbers from A to B, because this is how we surveyed the community, and this is what we're saying the gaps are for the organization. I think that will make it more of a business problem, and then your senior leaders will want to then address it to say, okay, well, now I understand that it can help me in this business line or this metric that I have a problem in, which I need to address. But I think it definitely starts with personal initiative and the passion to take the subject forward.
After you get the yes, make sure that you deliver on it. Make sure that you are highlighting those accomplishments, you are archiving them, and continue a dialogue, right? Because the next time is going to be less challenging to get that yes as it was the first time.
That's good advice. It's interesting, if you were to poll companies and ask how their first ERG started, I think you'll find more often than not it was a grassroots effort. So it can be done. You look at companies that have been at it for a while and have mature models, and sometimes it seems like that's, unattainable, but everyone started, sort of at the same place. This is a fairly new field and a fairly new, sort of space that people are working in. Other questions?
Hi, so my name is William Wong. I work for the Port Authority. I'm also the Asian American ERG for my company's membership chair. And so I wanted to ask about membership. So membership, from my experience, has been a big problem because we have 9 ERGs within our organization, but they all have different ways of becoming a member, and everyone has a kind of a different way of getting those members, and in particular in terms of coordinating also, like how do you become a member, what are the requirements, everyone does it a little bit differently. So in terms of promoting that intersectionality, it becomes incredibly difficult, because if someone puts in all their efforts to join one organization and then another organization has a completely different method, it really does raise the barriers for people to become members in multiple groups. So I was wondering, from your experiences, how do you work with other EBRGs to maybe promote multiple memberships, and how to really promote that intersectionality? Thank you.
So I'll take that, because we actually had this challenge 2 years ago, and we have solved it halfway through, and we have another halfway to go. The first thing I would say is membership should be open to everyone. It doesn't have to be that you have to belong to a certain group or ethnicity. We did raise this question to our HR to say, why can't I just have one link and I click on it and I just become a member of everyone? And what HR highlighted is very important, that some people do not like to be stereotyped, right? So, and some people don't want to be part of a group that they think they don't belong to for whatever reasons. So that answers a question that you cannot have one click for all members. The second challenge we had was that how do you actually reach out to people if you want them to become members? So we asked the question again, okay, you definitely have all these metrics. You know who's Asian, you know who's African American, you know who's Latino. Give me their email IDs and we will send a blast email. No, you cannot do that, because these people don't want to be identified as Asian. I said, okay, can we send an email to everyone in the organization? No, you can't do that. So we then kind of came up with, okay, if we have all these guidelines and restrictions and we can't do certain things, but there are some things we can do. So at every event, we first just made it available to everyone. So if I'm not part of an ERG, I can still flip that invite to anyone in my team, and everyone can come attend. And we created like a sign-in sheet, and then the sign-in sheets got too long, then they got too short, then there was no name on it. So we then just said, great, we're just gonna have a machine that you swipe your ID, and that's it, and we have your SOE ID. By swiping that your ID, you are telling me that you're okay to be part of this group. And then we send an email to you, and then you decide to be a member or not. And the last challenge we had was that HR and diversity was running their own numbers in terms of how many members they have, but that was not necessarily the same population that the ERGs were reaching out. So we're actually working on a project right now where we're working with HR to say, you can't have your own database, and we can't have our own database. We need to have one. You decide if it's yours or if it's ours, and we'll follow that. So I think talking to HR or diversity and inclusion, any organization that kind of governs all these ERGs, is very important to say, it may not be one size fits all, but it has to be at least some one way of these people becoming members, because people are fed up of emails, people are fed up of links, people are just fed up of getting too many communications. So this was challenges that we faced at Citi and across all ERGs, not just Asian, not just women's, across all ERGs. But we identified what are the top 3 issues, and we've solved for that. We're still working on the common database, and hopefully next year I will have a better update. But that's how we try to solve for it.
I would agree with that. I think that blasting emails, leveraging multiple lists, that's been very, very complex, and that's been a challenge. So what we have attempted to do is to really raise this concept of brand awareness, so that our employee groups understand what our mission is and how we're differentiated from others, where there might be some shared or similar goals, but that we can kind of create a connectivity to certain individuals within our organization, and also leveraging the different platforms in which we can do that. Because again, blast emails, those types of things don't often work because people often ignore them. And so trying to understand our demographic, understand what's relevant and important to them. Is it much more relevant for them to be drawn in because we're launching a program that's interesting, like a mentorship network? Because one of the challenges that we face, one of our key pillars, is that we are trying to not necessarily recruit, because like Sheetal, we have a very deep pipeline of junior candidates, but what we try to do is focus on those candidates who are maybe at VP level and above that are trying to get promoted in our organization. So trying to, in some cases, identify what some of the challenges are and the issues are, and reach out, do outreach, whether or not it's posting on our, our organization or our line of business homepage, and or by word of mouth, or creating these programs that then attract interest because it solves for some sort of professional development or on some other issue, is another way for you to try to reach out without necessarily trying to identify people by lists and by how they look.
I would just add that there's also options of like trying to contact people through other mediums. So we were having a chat earlier with a few of the Goldman folks, and one of the things that we all suffered with is across the ERGs, how do you get out an email to the right distribution list? And trying to fill out the template and all of that, it took like weeks, and it's like the event is tomorrow and the email hasn't gone out. So we did voice a lot of that feedback back to our diversity office, who governs the different ERGs, and they were able to help us to streamline that process and roll us onto something that's a lot more efficient. But the other thing to consider is it's not all about email, maybe thinking about different mediums of communicating. So at the firm, we use Symphony, which a lot of probably banks or clients use, and that's been a way for us to communicate events with our population as well. To even just say, the details in a Symphony chat room, which has a group of people, at least it gets the information out to certain pockets. So thinking more about what are different ways as opposed to just a traditional email to get out to people, because nowadays a lot of people are either working from home or on the road with clients, et cetera, and they need to be able to get that information pushed to them in different ways.
It's amazing how challenging the administrative end of running an ERG is and how much time it takes, and just managing the membership lists, the email, sending out distributions. If you're doing things at a specific location, how do you target it? Because you don't want to send something to people in Tampa if it's not going to be, for example, if it's not going to actually be broadcast there and all of that. And also you mentioned just the definition of a member. Right? And that's even up for debate sometimes. Is it somebody who's on your mailing list but never attended one event? Or is it somebody who is active? So we've done some things where we've defined what our members are. Anybody who's signed up for a mailing list just to get notified is a member. Anyone who is on our core teams are active members. So we actually have different definitions. We have members, we have members, we have core team members, and then we have our co-chairs. And that's been defined by, do you have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion or like somebody who governs across? Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I think the D&I group needs to sort of set some of the parameters for this. And then speaking with the D&I group to see whether there's different system resources that you can use. As often you can tie into your HRIS system, and that really helps if you're able to do that, where people can register through that, and then you can dump the emails, and you can do it targeted. So how about, do we have another question? We're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. We have one right back here.
Hi, Jennifer Cody, Danaher Corporation. You touched just briefly, I think, on my question, which is we are trying to figure out engagement for our remote employees and our field-based associates, because we do have a lot of people that are not really in an office ever. They're not even really based out of a particular office. So we're trying to figure out how we can build community within that group and what kind of resources are going to be most useful to them. Do any of you have any insight into that or any experience you would offer in terms of engaging those remote or field-based folks?
The events that we've done that has proved successful is by leveraging the technology that we have. So many times we've had events where members can participate through a WebEx, and they can learn great tips about what are the do's and don'ts about the conversation that you should be having with your manager, how your resume should look, what are the tips for an interview. So just things that are helpful if you hear them here in the room or as a recording, etc. We've done events like that just to reach to those audience that cannot physically be in the room.
I think similar at Goldman, it's been through, if it's different remote locations, having a VC set up in that location is something that we've done. For individuals maybe working from home, being able to do a playback. So maybe they couldn't attend at that time, but they can do a playback. And then for at Goldman, we have something called GS Talks, which is actually open to everyone. And that is broadcasted on our website. It's also on our social media, and through our Instagram is very active as well, where some of those tips or events are linked there also. So it gives opportunity for individuals to still benefit from the education or the sharing of intel while not being physically in the main office where the event is happening.
I'm actually going to share an idea with you, which is just in my head. I still haven't started working on it, is to create an ERG out of people who work remotely. They all have common challenges. They have common agendas. They all want visibility. They all want to be in front of seniors. They all want the next job. They all want the flexibility. Common goals, common problems, come up with a business plan, propose to your D&I team, and set up, I don't know, once a month, once every quarter. To Sheetal's point, if there's a closest location, all these people who are working remotely, it's not a bad idea for them to come into the office once a month or once every couple of weeks. So find a time that works for everyone, maybe lunchtime. People want to commute 2 hours, they get there, they've finished their day in the office. But I think forming an ERG would actually cater to those people, because while they do identify themselves of a certain ethnicity, I think their challenges have now moved to being a remote worker, and they will identify themselves more with that than of a certain ethnicity type.
And for remote locations, it's important if there's events that actually take place there, and it's not only being broadcast from the corporate headquarters. And so we have site leaders at each of our remote locations, and often, because if the site's smaller, you may not have representation across all of the ERGs, so you may have a D&I ambassador who kind of covers all the ERGs and then helps develop programming that's local. So we're going to be wrapping up in a minute. I want to, Sheetal, if you could I want to end with a success story. You talked a little bit about a really interesting project that you all helped with respect to communication skills that I think was a really sort of a big win, in my opinion, for an ERG. And if you could just describe that and just a couple of the benefits. And we're getting close on time,
Sure.
so if you could do it quickly, because then we're going to end with a rapid. I'll get everybody else teed up. We're going to do just one quick do or don't to end the session, okay?
So at Goldman, for the Asian population, we recognized that there was a theme around communication skills, and really the main problem, or the problem statement was with the community being able to articulate with impact, having presence, et cetera, becomes very important in a culture like Goldman Sachs. So what we identified was that the firm was actually, in part of our investing part of the organization, was funding a startup in Hong Kong on a company called Gweek, and it basically was it's an app where it's voice recognition, and it essentially, what you do is you speak into this app, and you maybe have like a 2-minute speech that you say, and it gives you all of the metrics around your tone, how you enunciated, and it compares you to, there are goals, like, do you want to be the next TED speaker, et cetera, but it allows you to have something that's more personal and that's on your phone that you could use. So what we said is, well, Goldman is funding this organization out in Hong Kong. We know that our Asian population is kind of struggling with this. Can we bring it to this population as a pilot and see how the actual app works? So we were able to successfully bring it into our network, it was a huge success, and it actually got rolled out to our analyst class, our A1s, A2s, A3s, because it's not just a skill that is that's important for the Asian community to focus on. It's for anyone entering the workforce. They need to be able to have presence, impact, and communicate with, with impact. So that was a big win for us.
That's great. All right, so Priya, we'll start with you. A quick do or don't. And we're going to go quickly down the list, and Chantal will end with you.
Is reach out and don't be shy. That's going to get you to a different place from where you are today.
I think my biggest do is to keep learning from others. And I think that a lot of times we can sometimes be very siloed in the work that we're doing with our head down. That could be very typical, but putting your head up, trying to identify opportunities to learn and consistently be learning and spreading that is going to be critical for all of our success.
You don't need a title to be a leader. If you genuinely believe that something is going to add value and make a difference, speak up. If you're not heard the first time, speak up again. And surround yourself with individuals who make the time to get to know you and support you.
I would say initiate and participate with passion. Don't treat this as a check-the-box exercise.
Great advice. So I want to thank everybody. It was a really great discussion, and I really appreciate all of the questions you had and your interest and your engagement. So thanks, and enjoy the rest of the day here today.